Hello, welcome to Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This is kind of an interesting conversation. Me and the chat are in the middle of it, so I thought I'd record a video for YouTube and maybe also the podcast so you can get caught up with the news as well. Because while it's kind of non-news, it's also pretty massive news depending on the outcome. And I'll try and get through it super quick so you can keep up. It's about Warhammer 40,000 and the Warhammer 40,000 app, or the multiple different Warhammer 40,000 apps. It requires a bit of backstory, so I'll be super quick. And I've tried to surmise some of it in this Twitter thread that I've done on Twitter. So the quick bit of backstory: Warhammer 40,000, if you're playing the game, requires you to write a list, and for that you could obviously do it with pen and paper, but a lot of people use an app. Mainly because there's lots of rules references. Also, it's pretty mobile as well. Like, you go somewhere and then you look stuff up in the app. Now, when 9th edition launched, which was the previous version, which launched 3 years ago, so that'll be 2020, they also, 6 months late, launched the Warhammer 40,000 app, which was here. Previous to this, Games Workshop didn't have a system for you to build lists, very complicated lists as well, via them. It was always done by a third-party app called Scribe. There's a quick TLDR on Scribe. Scribe was developed by a developer, a single one, and you could subscribe to it financially. There was then a bunch of Scribe data people who would put all the information from a codex into these data reserves, and then the app would reference the data reserves, and then you could build and create lists of it. If there was something wrong in the app, then it wasn't the app developer that would change it, it would be the data reserve people, all of whom were working for free and wasn't helping. Anyway, the Battlescribe developer just vanished for 2 years during this kind of like 3-year arc from the launch of 9th edition to now. About 8 months ago, he reappeared because the app hadn't been updated in over 2 years, and so iTunes takes it off the App Store. He came back to reassert its credit on the iTunes Store because there were some conservative estimates that he was making somewhere in the region of hundreds of thousands of pounds off of it, and so wasn't. And then he obviously didn't want that like pay pig to go away, especially when he wasn't doing any work for it. He was just getting thousands and thousands of pounds. Then he, much like a landlord, he's a complete leech. And so then what happened next was he then came back, did this whole song and dance, said that he'd had some problems in his life, tweeted a few more times, and then disappeared about 6 weeks later, again from the online space, and no one has been able to contact him since. Still, Battlescribe has moved forward, but as we get to the launch of 10th edition, because it's structurally so different from 9th edition in how you build a list, all of the people who write the information, the resources, have said that Battlescribe will no longer work properly. So Battlescribe is not a functional way to build lists in the future. Lovely, right? So then, so that's done. And also, we should just all never use Battlescribe again. The guy's a leech. You need to delete it from your phones, mark it down on the store, like give it a 1-star review, just like absolutely bomb it and tank it to everyone you can. Okay, so moving on to Warhammer 40,000 app from Games Workshop. They launched it 6 months late. They used it 6 months late. They launched it 6 months late. It didn't really work. You couldn't really build lists in it. In order to get the rules on that, you couldn't, like with something like D&D and Beyond, where you buy a rule book and it like you can flick through all the pages with the art and everything. This was just like the rules, like the text and the numbers. There was no way to like buy a book through the app. Also, you could never buy anything through the app as it was anyway, because Games Workshop doesn't want to pay the money to iTunes or to Google Plus. Which they take like 12 to 15% of each sale. So they didn't want to do that. So instead, you could only ever buy physical copies of the books and then use a code in the book to unlock that in the app. That's how the app worked. This app now, and this is the current news, this brings us up to date, and I've straw polled a couple of people over the past day about how the current app works. No one uses it for list building, I don't think, or very few people do. Some people use it as a rules reference, because if you have bought all of the books, you can unlock the rules and then scan through them. Some people use it for that. But generally, I think the consensus is that the app is not fit for purpose. It's definitely not fit for purpose for writing and building lists. okay, we're in a good place now, okay? Because actually we're at like a crossroads where life's about to get really awesome or not as awesome, which is fun. And that is that there's a new app, because the app from Games Workshop, so Battle Scribe will throw in the bin. So now all of the community's kind of hopes and dreams rest on either a third-party developer producing a way to build lists, or Games Workshop produces that. Now, they have, as you can see here, made the current app, now be an old app. The name of this app has changed to make way for all new Warhammer 40,000 app. This app will continue to exist, and your digital entitlements and paid-for content remain accessible. However, this app will no longer receive ongoing support. We look forward to welcoming you to all new Warhammer 40,000 app. Visit our official website for more information. Okay. And then in one of their datasheet articles, so from one of the Warhammer community posts, when they were talking about the datasheets, they said this: there is a third way to peruse your units. Every unit in this index text will be added to the upcoming Warhammer 40,000 app, alongside the new Battleforge tool, which is the list building tool, to help you plan your army. These have all been rebuilt from the ground up for the new edition, and we'll have more news on the app very soon. And this is the crossroads that I'm talking about. Because Games Workshop has a history of mothballing apps. They've done this quite a lot. Even if you've ended up spending money inside of the app, the old Age of Sigmar app got mothballed, the Paint app got mothballed, and several other apps got mothballed as well from these. So I guess abandonware is what some people would call that as well. I'm not overly certain. It definitely makes sense that they build a new app. And as I hear it, or as I understand it, this app, and we kind of talked about this on the 40k Adjacent show a few weeks ago before I went to Worlds, there's a couple of things that we've heard about this app. And again, I'll reference it here. I'm hearing it will track your games and stats, and even have tourney software integrated. So I'm going to talk about another app now called Best Coast Pairings. If you are at an event, you need to submit your list. You're like, hey, this is the list I'm playing. Submit yourself as a player. And then the tournament software, what it will do, it will match you against other people. Whoever's won will play someone else who's won. I'm sure many of you are aware, but for people who aren't, that's what the tournament software does. So that's an additional app. What we might be seeing from Games Workshop is them trying to integrate all of those apps together. So it might be your rules reference app, your list building app, and also your tournament or game tracking software as well, which is quite interesting. And then because they probably want to put all of it together in one place, so there's not third-party people using what I think they would consider to be their game and their consumer base. But right now, we have no idea. And there's kind of two things happening. Either they're being very gentle about talking about it with the upcoming kind of in the upcoming news, because they haven't really mentioned it, because it's either they want to do a big song and dance, there's going to be like a video tutorial, all this information on how the biggest tabletop game in the world up until 2023, the game company that make it haven't produced a way for you to build lists properly and also use them. So, it's pretty crazy if you think about it. Loads of other game systems, MCP, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, all of these have got free list building software, as do I think things like Kings of War. There are loads and loads of good list building software that's free, available from other companies for their game systems, but the biggest company in the world who make the biggest game in the world, it's never been available. So this is kind of interesting, and it's pretty exciting actually, because if they come out of the gates with something that does all of these things, that's awesome. That's definitely a great future that we've got. The problem is they have a pretty bad track record, which is sad. So then you've got maybe things that have happened that are bad, and so it could be bad, right? Which is one crossroads, but it doesn't mean it's going to be. I want to be really clear about that. My personal feelings are, and from conversations I've had, that they are going to try and do something really massive. We'll see. I don't really know. I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know what the chat thinks. So this is where I'm going to talk to them now and see what their thoughts are on it, because it's quite interesting. And to some of you people who only build and paint models, this means close to nothing. I completely understand that. For me personally, the idea of carrying around several physical books just isn't something I really fit into my life anymore. It's not like an a 1960s movie where I've got like the leather satchel full of books. Like, no, I don't do that. I have a tablet, like, or a phone, like other people, where all of my digital resources are kept. So, like, I'm not really interested in there being physical books. I also don't want to buy physical books because, as we've seen from there being a new edition, all of the old books, which I buy for rules, sometimes story, but other rules, are also wasted. Like, and I don't want to buy just physical books for them. So I would really like there to be a way to digitally purchase those books, which I think would be really useful as well. Wolverine Wickman in the chat says Infinity has 2 great apps, one for list building and one for all the missions, all free and really well done. Warhammer Rob says, don't Games Workshop have a stake in BCP? I don't think they do. BCP is an independent company, and while they do work closely together, BCP works closely with lots of other game manufacturers. We just don't tend to hear about it very much. Twisted Kane says that he writes his lists by quill and vellum, true Imperial style. Rastendo says shelf space is a valuable resource, plus having lots of clutter will be while moving is such a pain. Glowdan says a list builder with rules, references, and tournament attendance integration would be the dream. Okay, I agree with that. It would be. Like, we're sat here with a company that has prodigious amounts of money and the ability to be like, wow, we are going to make a new edition and we are going to make nothing but profit. Like, I think someone did some dirty paper math and we think that they made roughly £40 million profit from the Leviathan launch. Now, that obviously could change because we don't know exactly how many units they made. We're hearing it's 750,000. So, but you can take like $250,000 off off that profit and make a functional list builder so people can play your game and buy your minis. Seems like a sensible choice. Lil Ben Level says, my big question is the app is done by white label app team hired, or are they trying to do it fully in-house? Also, if in-house, as the intern asked what it heard about unions. Anyway, so that's the kind of like the TLDR of the app stuff. Maybe some people don't really care overly much, especially if all you're trying to do is build and paint some minis. I understand, but for tournament goers and also people that want to write lists, writing lists is super fun. This is the thing as well. They should be really encouraging you as the user. I was talking about this last night with my friend. You should be encouraging you as a user to engage with the IP as much as possible. Like, it should be super fun. You know, you should be like, they should gamify it. Like, we're like, oh, I see you've written 0 death lists, or I see you've written 0 Tyrannid lists. Like, you know, you write 5 Tyrannid lists, it gives you a Tyrannid list writing achievement. Like, it's insane that they haven't, especially because, like, insane they haven't done stuff like that, especially because they sell their IP to lots of, like, mobile game, gacha game companies consistently, right? And that's weird that they haven't integrated with that. So anyway, odd situation, and an interesting situation. Like, we're going to keep our eyes on it because I think that's super fun. But I'm really hopeful. This isn't a slam video against Battle Scribe, fuck them. But like, this is a hopeful video just with the news wrapped in it. It's like, this is the situation as we go. I'm excited to see how it carries on, right? It's somewhat sad that we're having the same convos around 10th launch we had around 9th launch. And that's also true. Team and Cash. That's kind of why, like, I'm a little bit concerned about the conversation, because we had this exact same conversation 3 years ago. And we should have had this conversation also at 8th. It's just Games Workshop have been quite bad at, like, doing aftercare of their product, especially when other game companies do really well. Really interesting. Love to know everyone's thoughts. Loads of love. I hope you enjoyed the show.